What's up, guys? Joe here. Today, we're going to be working on this. There, screen's on, but it's cracked. We're going to be working on this LG G8X. Do you want to say hi? Come on over.
Hi.
Hey, let's get started.
Welcome to the full review. Here is all the tools that I recommend for this repair. I'll have links in the description down below for you to be able to get all of these. They are affiliate links, just so you know, help a brother out. So each one of these tools I'm going to use in this video when we replace this screen. Here's the phone I'll be working on today. I'm going to start by removing the back glass. It has adhesive all around the outside border here, so I'll be using my hair dryer to heat that up. My heat gun broke, so right now I'll be using a hair dryer. I'm going to heat this up and then slip my X-Acto knife between the glass and the frame, and I'll start working this back glass away so I can get to the internals of the phone. Once I've applied enough heat to loosen the adhesive, I'll insert my X-Acto knife between the back glass and the frame. I don't want to put too much pressure right here. I just want to try to create a gap so I can insert a iFixit guitar pick. Once I have the guitar pick in place, I'll remove the X-Acto knife and I'll begin working my way down the side. I've got plenty of heat on this side, so I'm going to go ahead and work it down. Once I meet some resistance, I'll apply more heat, and I'll just keep rinsing and repeating this until I get the back off. The key here is to be patient. Don't be afraid to use the heat. I'll get this to where it's almost too hot to touch, and that's usually about the time that it's good to go. I'll keep working my guitar pick around the frame. I'll insert extra guitar picks where I've already opened up the frame just to keep the adhesive from reattaching and undoing what I've already done. You can see just how smooth this guitar pick slides down the frame once I've applied the proper amount of heat. Once again, be patient. If you meet any resistance, go ahead and stop and add more heat. It's real easy to break these thin pieces of glass on the back, and it's really frustrating when you break one and you've already got the screen sitting there. You can order them. They're not very expensive online. It's just a matter of time and frustration. So be patient. Now I've worked my way all the way around the frame to remove the adhesive. I'll remove my guitar picks, and you can work it around. It's still going to be a little stuck, but you can just wiggle it and work it around, and then that back glass will peel right off. Now the back glass is out of the way, it reveals the internals. I'll unscrew the 14 Phillips head screws that are holding the mid frame to the outside frame. These are holding in the mid frame, which protects the motherboard and all the internals, and also houses the loudspeaker and usually also the wireless charger. I believe this one does also. With the last of the screws removed, I'm going to go ahead and remove the SIM card tray before I start pulling on anything. If you forget this, it's really easy to mess up the motherboard where the SIM card attaches, and those parts usually aren't replaceable unless you're into micro soldering, and that's a very specific skill, so most people probably aren't. Now that the SIM card's removed, I'll flip it back over. I'll use a pair of tweezers, and in the corners there's always a little gap between the mid frame and the subframe. That's where you're going to want to pry up. You'll get it loose, and then you should just be able to snap these out of the way. Once you've got the screws out, they are just little snaps on the ends that pop into place. Here I'm removing the top subframe and also the wireless charging coil. The bottom is a separate piece. I'm going to pry it up the same way. This piece is going to be the one that houses the loudspeaker as well, so it's going to be a little bit thicker. Now that I've got that removed, I can see the motherboard, the charge port, the battery, everything that's on the inside, the cameras and everything. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the battery to cut power to the motherboard. That way I don't accidentally mess anything up. Now I'm going to disconnect the screen, and I'm going to go ahead and get my new screen. You can see here the connections for the two. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just retro plug in the new screen, and then I'll plug the battery back in. This is important to do before you ever take the phone completely apart. The reason is you want to make sure this screen works, because most of the time, if you've adhered this screen down and it doesn't work, there's almost no way to get it off without breaking it. And if it's broken, you're not going to get a refund. So you want to go ahead and test it, make sure it works. If it does, we'll keep on with the repair. If it doesn't, I'll return it back to where I bought it and get one that does fit. Once the phone's finally powered on, I'll just scroll and swipe and move around on the screen. It already cut on, so I know that part works now. I just want to make sure the digitizer's intact and that this screen is fully functional. Once I've realized that everything is good to go here, all the keys are working on the keyboard and everything is good to go, I'll go ahead and begin disconnecting the cables again. Once again, I'll start with the battery to cut the power to the board. And once I have that one disconnected, then I will remove the new screen. With the new screen out of the way, I'll disconnect the front camera. And this camera is removable. It's not attached to anything, so you can just pull that piece right out. Now I'm going to pop free the antenna cable. This one is a little tricky. You have to finagle it kind of, but it's okay. You can work a little bit with the tweezers. You're not going to mess anything up now that you have the battery disconnected. With all the ribbon cables out of the way, I can just slowly pull out my motherboard now. The motherboard is just sitting in here now. There's nothing holding it in place. Once I get it peeled up, you'll see on the bottom side the ribbon cable connection for the charge port down below. Pop those free, and now my motherboard is out of the phone and out of the way. I'm going to apply some 99% alcohol to the edges and corners of the battery. This battery is in its own little small housing, so this isn't going to bleed out anywhere. But what this alcohol is going to do is it's going to soften the adhesive that's holding down the battery, because these batteries are held in tight. They are really, really held in there. And you can't really pry on the batteries too much because you don't want to bend them when you build them. When you bend them, you can mess up the lithium inside. So I'm going to let that alcohol do the heavy lifting for me. Once it's had time to dissolve into the adhesive, I'll use my pry tool to slightly lift up the battery, and then once again I'll use the guitar picks so that way I don't take a chance on puncturing the battery, and I'll just work my way around this battery and pull it out of place. With the battery broken free, I can pull it up. That adhesive is going to be really gummy and gross with the alcohol on it. Once that alcohol dries, that adhesive will be good as new. It'll stick again, and you'll be able to just reapply the battery to the frame. Now with that out of the way, I'm going to work heat around the corners of, or around the edges of the screen. This screen is just glued down on the edges and the back of the LCD. So I'm going to heat this up again, get it up to temperature, and then I'm going to use my X-Acto knife and start peeling this up. Since this screen's already cracked, and generally the screens are glued down a lot more than the back, I'm going to heat it up, and I'm only going to use the X-Acto knife. I'm not going to use any guitar picks, and I'm just going to pry this screen up. It's not a whole lot of adhesive holding the glass down, but generally the entire LCD or OLED panel is completely glued down, but those basically bend like paper, so once you get the glass out of the way, it's really easy to get all that stuff out, or it's really easy to get the rest of it out of the way. You can see here, I don't have to put the X-Acto knife in very deep. Literally where the OLED panel ends and where the frame, between the end of the OLED panel and the frame, is the only spot that has adhesive. So there's not a whole lot holding it here. That's why they glue everything down, because they want to make sure the screen's not going to fall off while you're using your phone. Now I am using these guitar picks just to lift the screen up in the areas I've already broken the adhesive free, but I'm still going to use something kind of sturdy and strong to kind of force my way through this screen. This one you don't have to be gentle, you don't have to really be patient, you're kind of just bullying the screen to come off of the frame. On this spot of the frame, I kind of lost grip. You can see I got a little wild and actually scratched the frame up pretty good right there. So be careful of that. Other than scratching the frame though, this part is really simple and easy to do. And once again, I'm using a hairdryer right here. If you're actually using a heat gun, you're not going to have to heat it up nearly as long as I had to. They're made to run hotter and they heat things up a lot faster. This is the point where you can see the importance of removing the front camera. I don't have to worry about getting any shards of glass or anything that's going to ruin that lens. I can just work on the screen and not have any hiccups or issues that I'm going to cause later on. You can see this screen's kind of fighting me to come off. Normally they're a lot easier, but I'm glad this happened on camera. That way you can see how you just kind of have to do what works. I cut myself, got a shard of glass in my finger. It's crazy how sharp these pieces of glass are. They're way sharper than any car window or house window glass. But there you can see now I've gotten it pulled up. The screen came up pretty well in one piece. Now with that out of the way, I'm going to use my scraper tool and I'm going to remove all the excess adhesive and small pieces of glass that are in the way. You want to get these removed because they're going to cause issues with laying the new screen down, and it could even crack your new screen. And it's also going to keep the new adhesive from being able to secure that screen, the new screen, down in place on the frame. This is probably one of the most important steps of the repair. You want to make sure everything is clean and like fresh out of the factory. That way you can get that secure, solid connection between your screen and your frame. This particular phone has a plastic bezel in between the screen and the frame. So you do want to get everything off, but you want to be careful because it's very easy to gouge into that. And that can cause issues sometimes. Normally it just is aesthetically unpleasing when you get these grooves and cuts in there. So just be mindful of that. Other than that, this part is fairly easy, and as you can see, pretty quick. I didn't have a whole lot of shards of glass or anything in the way. But now that I've got all the excess adhesive out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and take an old toothbrush and just make sure I get every little piece out of the way so this new screen can lay down smoothly onto the frame. With my work area cleaned up, I'm ready to start reassembling this phone. I'll apply my new Tessa tape adhesive all around the outside border where the original adhesive was on this screen. You'll want to start applying the adhesive at the top next to the earpiece speaker. I'll show you why here in a minute. You don't have to worry about the thickness of the tape in the middle when you're laying it down because it's the same thickness as the tape you put on the outside, so it evens itself out. It's going to look nice and clean and professional, and it's going to look good as it did before the screen was broken. When working around these corners, you can do it one of two ways. You could do the straight run and then cut it and then start the straight run on the next side. I found that it's a lot easier to just kind of make a little loop and then start the next side and do it all as one piece. And then once I peel up the wax paper on the opposite side of the adhesive, I'll take my tweezers and kind of work that corner down and get it nice and smooth. That way it's a nice transition between each side. And it also kind of helps with more water resistance later on. These phones, no phone is waterproof. That's a common misconception. They are water resistant. When you replace a screen, it kind of throws that out the window, but that doesn't mean we can't take every step to try to improve that water resistance that we just lost. Now I am using the 1mm black Tessa tape around this border. The reason being is because the gap between the edge of the glass and the edge of the OLED panel is very thin, and this 1mm tape fits perfectly between those two so that it gets a nice seated placement onto the frame. I'm at the end of the frame now. This is why it was important to start up by the earpiece, otherwise you were going to have to cut your line at some point in between. You don't want to apply adhesive over the earpiece mesh, otherwise you won't be able to hear very well in it. But since I started on one end of the earpiece, I'm ending on the other end, so I didn't have to make any cuts in between. I just had to make that one cut at the beginning or at the end of the run right there. With my adhesive applied around the border of the frame, now I'll add a couple of strips in the middle just to help secure that screen in place. That way there's no wiggle room. This thing will sit solid and it won't budge. I'm also using the 4mm Tesa tape here. When you're applying this adhesive, you want to make sure you're doing it on solid pieces of metal. You don't want to run over any holes or any other small parts. It's really easy to tear these parts if you get adhesive on them. And you don't want to cover up the holes because some of these holes are vent ports for the heat to dissipate through the phone, so you don't want to change that performance on the phone. Now that's all the adhesive I'm going to apply on the side of the screen. I'll take my tweezers and remove all of the wax paper that's covering up the other sticky side of the tape. With those removed, I'll be able to start working down my corners. Hopefully you'll be able to see here how I just kind of gently roll them over and get them smooth on the edge. If there is any kind of creases or anything in your tape, it's not going to be a big deal. Don't worry about it. You'll still be able to use that tape. As long as you're using this black Tesa tape, you'll still be able to use it with creases. It's not going to raise the screen up at all. Everything will work just fine. With all the corners of my tape ready, I'm going to take my screen, and if you're looking at it like this with the top on top and the bottom on bottom, you can see the slot in the frame where the LCD or OLED ribbon cable is going to go. I'll slide that ribbon cable in there. Be very gentle there. Don't pull that cable too hard. It's easy to tear up that cable. So I'm going to gently get it in place, and then I'm going to use my thumbs and just kind of slowly work the screen down on top of all the adhesive. This adhesive sticks very well, so once you get this down, it's going to be really hard to get this screen up. So take your time, make sure you get it lined up properly on the frame, and then just go through and work it around and get a good connection on the adhesive with the frame. With the new screen installed, I'm ready to put in all the small parts. I want to make sure and get this dock port connected on this motherboard. So I'm going to put the motherboard in place. They lay exactly in place on top of each other. So what I'm going to do is kind of line them up, get the motherboard installed, and then I'll just push down right there where the connection is, and you'll hear a firm snap if you get it in place. So now that I've got the motherboard connected, I'll grab my antenna and I'll reapply that connection. Those can be kind of tricky as well. So I'll just make sure I'm nice and gentle with it and get it in place. With the antenna plugged in, I'll plug in my front camera ribbon cable and then my screen ribbon cable. All these cables you should feel or hear a nice snap when they lock into place. And with all the ribbon cables installed, I'll put my battery back in place. The alcohol's had plenty of time to dissipate now, so this adhesive is sticky again, so it's going to hold it in place. I put my battery in, plug in the ribbon cable, and now I've got all my small parts plugged back in. I'll begin putting my subframe back in. You can see along the edge here the little flanges that stick out. Those are just going to snap in underneath the frame, and that's what's going to hold these in place. These are important to get in place properly because a lot of these connections that go through this are just tension connections. So you want to make sure you get all those little snaps in place. And once you have them in place, you'll hear a nice click and a pop. You're not breaking anything, it's just that plastic popping in place. With the lower mid frame in place, I'll grab the top mid frame and the charging coil. And once again, I'm just going to snap those little flanges inside the frame. And that's going to hold everything together good enough for me to put all the screws in. Honestly, the screws are just there to make sure all those connections are seated properly, the tension connections. But I'm going to take all these screws. Remember again, it's 14 Phillips head screws, and I'm going to apply all those to the frame. And after that, we're about to finish up repairing this phone. With all the Phillips screws installed, I'm going to go ahead and power the phone back on. I want to do this before I put the back glass on to make sure I've got all solid connections with my ribbon cables, because I don't want to have to peel this back glass back off again. While it's powering up, I'm going to remove any adhesive that's ripped or torn. Basically all the adhesive that's left on, most likely I'm going to go ahead and peel off. This adhesive tears and rips and stretches and doesn't really work well once you've pulled it up. So once I've got all that peeled up, I'll go ahead and apply more of that 4mm black Tessa tape. That stuff holds strong and secure, and it's going to keep this phone together for a long time. Once again, when I'm applying this adhesive, I'll do the same thing I did with the front screen. I'll loop around the corners, and then later on, after I've removed the wax paper, I'll just kind of work them down flat around the frame. That way my back glass can just lay down smoothly and look like it's never been removed before. You can see at the bottom of this frame, I kind of did an overlap where I ran two at the bottom. That's just going to be extra adhesive to help keep the back on. I'm also going to run another strip at the top here. You don't need it in the middle. That can actually, if you ever try to take the back off, it can make it very easy to mess up your battery or your wireless charging coil. So I try to avoid putting adhesive in those areas and just put them on the mid frame where the plastic is, where I know that if I ever yank or pull too hard on this when I'm pulling it apart, that it's not going to mess any small parts up inside the phone. With all the wax paper removed, now I'll take my tweezers and go around and flatten out all the corners that I've folded over. And then after that, we're just applying the back glass and good to go. While I'm finishing up the last step of this repair, I'd like to thank you guys for watching. Comment below any questions or any issues you're having. Please like and subscribe. Share with any friends you have that are trying to repair their phones or anything like that. And I really appreciate you guys' support. All right, guys, that's it for the in-depth tutorial for the LG G8X screen repair. Thanks for watching. Comment below if you have any questions or anything else you have to say. And stay tuned for a new short video coming out real soon after this one. It's going to be a special video where I might be thanking you guys for subscribing. And I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it might be... Hang on. I'm trying to get it done. But it might be something like this. All right, so stay tuned, guys. Thanks for watching. Joe Does Stuff. Like and subscribe. All those good things. Have a good one.